There's your word for today. The count. Okay. That's definitely working. If you're watching this later, looks ridiculously large, but in here, that might not be enough. Wait, can I make it? That's about as big as I can make it. Okay. I think we've got a little bit of time. There's not too many slides left, so I want to just kind of back up. We hit these right at the end last time. The idea of the free market view versus the consumer protection view. As we've said already once that uh, we're in a position as computer science people, software engineers, to look at choices and say that's not a binary choice. I know what a binary choice is. This is another case where that comes up. People on the political right tend to see things from a free market perspective. That's another one of the that's things that's characteristic of somebody who's right leaning. That people should be trusted is kind of the basic idea. If they don't like the way a company does something, they'll go somewhere else. If they don't, man, that was loud. If they each person has some different set of values, although we tend to coalesce around a certain ones, but consumers should be allowed to make their own choices, take their own risks, pay their own prices. And, this is being put to the test, although conservatives in general, if you've been reading the news about big tech in Congress, it's some of this, they're saying that, people are monopolies and companies are monopolies and things like that. But there's also a sense of, that some of what gets conservatives' ire up is that these companies they believe are um, punishing, they think they are limiting conservative voices, and that's the problem with big tech. That's what they say a lot of times. The other side is what more liberal leaning or left leaning folks will say is the idea that consumers need protection, that consumers do not and cannot a lot of times know enough to make their own choices, and so they need more than just guidance. They need the government to step in and make some rules. And of course, where you are on the political spectrum says how many rules that you want. And if you want my personal view, I don't see this as a binary choice that you need to be free market or you need to be of a consumer protection mindset. I prefer to and we'll see this as the course goes on. We'll see cases where consumer protection did a good job, and we'll see cases, at least one, where free market solution did better than a government attempt at regulation when we talk about the game industry. Anyway, and then you certainly hear this from usually from the political left. The more left leaning you are, the more you'll tend to agree with this, that the law is behind. We touched on this right at the end, so I'm not going to belabor it too long. But, and I'll give you my opinion again, I think in America we tend to be too I don't want to say reactionary, because that means something different in politics, but we tend to react. If you look at, look at the lead up to World War I and World War II. World War I, we were almost completely unprepared for anything, so it took us a good year before we were really sending troops to Europe. World War II, we did better. There was things going on, but we were still way behind Germany and Japan and Britain as far as preparations go when we entered the war. But that's been an American tradition of waiting until things get pretty bad, and goodness, we've seen that's waiting until we're about to default on some loans before we decide to raise the debt ceiling. That's been a common theme in recent years. Well, really the last decade or so, maybe more than a decade now, that we only seem to take action when there's a blindingly obvious problem that we need to deal with. And so, again, my opinion is that we tend to be too much so of we wait till it's just obvious that we got to do something before we do something. But at the same time, we don't want to do things too quickly. Again, until you know what the real problem is, you don't really want to go trying to make laws when you don't even understand what the laws are supposed to do yet, and you're just kind of trying to think ahead. So there's a better balance than I think the balance that we in the U.S. have struck, but there we are. Okay, so there's something. This comes from the book. There's a series of principles called fair information principles, and I think I may have actually combined combined a couple, and I may have added one of my own. I forget now. Just things that will kind of keep you from potentially abusing your users' data. I'm going to turn this down. First one is, we talked about informed consent, so here it is. If you're going to use, their data in a certain way, let them know ahead of time. This is certainly, you've seen this among apps, particularly in iOS, where an app has to ask you before it can turn on Bluetooth. So it was a year or two ago now when Apple made a change, and all these apps started asking me, can I please use Bluetooth to find things around or find nearby devices? And most of the time you say, why do you need that? And so you deny it. But if you do ask for it, say why and try to be clear about it. The second one is that less data is usually good. If you don't need data, then don't get it. In some cases you might be tempted to say, oh, well, I might need this later on, so let me go ahead and get it so I don't have to ask for it later. That can lead, sometimes that's true, but the less data you have, the less problems you're going to have if, your whole database gets leaked, or somebody comes calling and says, hey, I need this data, and you say, I'm sorry, I don't have it, I can't give it to you. Certainly, there are legal issues that we may talk about some. Data that sometimes you have to keep because law enforcement may by law be able to compel you to give it up. That's also been in the tech news of late. There was I forget which VPN it was. Found out they were keeping more data than users thought they were because law enforcement required it, or the law required it. The third is, well, prefer, I'll say later, prefer opt-in to where, if you're going to, by default, ask for data, make it clear where you can opt out. And not just at the beginning, if people decide later they want to opt out, make that easy. Or just avoid it all and make something opt-in where you can. If you don't need data anymore, get rid of it. Again, you can't leak what you don't have. So you're saving yourself some of the embarrassment if you have a data leak or somebody gets access to your system if you have less data there for them to get. This one, and this I think in the book was 2, maintaining the data. Keeping data accurate is difficult because people move, people change. Well, people don't really change phone numbers much anymore, but it does happen. Certainly people move around, people may use a different email. Their demographics may change. As people get older, or they get married, or they get divorced, or all these things happen, so that your data may not be accurate anymore. And so you might do things for your users that they don't want because they don't need it anymore. But anyway, stuff like that. Do your best to keep it secure. The thing, really, the goal of security is not, well, I mean, you would want to have perfect security that cannot be breached, but since that's generally impossible, mainly because there were people involved in people with passwords and with their USB keys and whatever, that's not likely to, you can't assume that you will never be hacked. But one of the unwritten rules of security is you don't have to be perfectly secure. You just have to be more secure than other people around you. If you're a harder nut to crack, then most criminals are going to go looking somewhere else because usually they're not doing it for free. And so if you're not a target that looks very easy for them, they will likely move on. And there's a link down there about zero knowledge encryption. That's the idea that is, I have a service and all the data that is sent to me is encrypted and it stays encrypted on my service. And in fact, from my perspective, I don't have the decryption keys. So users are the only ones that can get it. So it means that you download the data and then you decrypt it on their local device with their key that's never sent around. And then, so even I have no access to the data. So even if somebody gets access to my servers, it does not help them because I can't even decrypt it. At least I'd have to brute force it as well. The last one, and I think I added this one to what the book said, is law enforcement. And this really hit the news, not for the first time, but maybe the biggest case was probably 3 or 4 years ago now. There was a shooting in California, and it's either the local police or the FBI, somewhere near San Francisco, I think, demanded that Apple, so the attacker had used an iPhone, and they demanded that Apple unlock this person's iPhone so they can check where they'd been and their contacts, the call history and whatever. And Apple said, no, we're not going to do that. And that was a big to do. Eventually, Apple was exonerated, which I think was the right decision in that case. And I believe what ended up happening is, the FBI either had some technology or they hired out somebody who was able to break into the iPhone and get them what they wanted. So, if you are a big enough company, if you deal with customer data, it is possible that law enforcement may come calling saying, hey, we're investigating a crime and we need access to your data. Your answer may be, that's fine, or your answer may be, legally I have to do it. I'll get to you in a second. Your answer may be, legally I have to do it, or your answer, or you may have the choice. It's much easier to make a choice when you've thought about it ahead of time and you have a policy in place, so you're not scrambling at the last minute, say, okay, what do we tell these people and what do we do if you pre-thought it out and looked at the legal ramifications, things will go easier for you. Yeah, you had a question?
Well, I do actually remember that case with Apple a little
Uh-huh.
bit. If I remember correctly, the FBI wanted them to make some backdoor specifically to get into that iPhone, possibly thinking they could just throw it away afterwards.
Yes.
And Apple really didn't want to do that because if they made that even once, there's no way to get rid of it, and then
Right.
there would just be a backdoor
Yeah.
into
Okay. Yeah.
anyone's iPhone.
Yeah, that was, and that has been a thing. That's actually in Australia. There was a case or a law a couple years ago. So the comment was about that case with Apple, and it was the FBI wanted a backdoor into the iPhone and wanted Apple to put a backdoor into everybody's iPhone, so that law enforcement could get in. That's been, I mean, that kind of idea goes back to the '90s, at least I see you, where what was it? Was it the V chip? Oh, something. Anyway, where governments have wanted to be able to break encryption more easily, but as you say, as soon as somebody makes a backdoor, you can't undo it without changing the software again. And once that backdoor gets leaked, the way to do it gets out, then your security's lost. Yeah, you had a.
I just find it really interesting how the government has all these restrictions in place for companies and stuff like that,
Mhm.
but they think these restrictions don't apply to them as well
Okay.
nowadays.
Because governments have a lot of restrictions they place on companies, but they don't uh, feel the same restrictions.
They know what can go wrong if the data is used poorly, and they leave those backdoors. If they would leave a backdoor like that,
It's
companies don't really care because it gives them free access to
right.
do whatever they want.
The whole idea of what a company can do versus what the government can do, and specifically um, what an agency like the NSA can do, breaking into things, and then it was actually not that long ago. Normally the NSA, if they find a way into something, as far as we know, they keep that under wraps so they can keep using it. Um, but there was a case again in the last year or two. Was it that? It wasn't that printer thing with Microsoft. Anyway, it was something with Microsoft that they said, "Hey, this is an issue," and made the kind of the bug report. Say, "Hey, you need to patch your systems because this is a known exploit." Probably some other government or somebody else they'd figured out knew how to do this, and so they said, "We better fix it because other people can do it now."
It should be legal, but the Patriot Act actually makes it where things are just completely fine.
Yeah, and that's a whole that's a whole rabbit hole we can go down, especially with the Patriot Act. Um, if you're not familiar with it, the Patriot Act, it was enacted after September 11th, 2001, after the terrorist attacks on that day, and gave the government more freedom to look for domestic terrorists. Was the idea?
And then all that
Uh,
information was leaked from Edward Snowden.
I'm sorry.
And then Edward Snowden leaked a bunch of that information.
Yeah, I think well, some of the Patriot was known, but he Edward Snowden did. I think he showed abuses of it, or ways it was used, and a whole bunch of things that the NSA does. That's a yeah, that's a. We'll talk about leaking things. We may not talk about Snowden specifically, but he was a yeah. He shed some light on a lot of things, and whether that's good or bad is up for debate, I suppose. But anyway, so there's that. Here's the Fourth Amendment. If you want to see, this is where a lot of things regarding uh, privacy and what the government can do, and something that you could argue the Patriot Act. A lot of people argue the Patriot Act circumvents a lot of what's in the Fourth Amendment by allowing the government to seize records and things that um, you wouldn't expect them to be able to see normally, or they wouldn't be able to see normally, at least legally. Anyway, let's skip past that. Um, so what, you know, this has all been at the, big company government level. Well, what about you and me? I mean, chances are that most of you are going to have a nice career. Probably not to be, probably not going to get into a position, I'm sorry to break it to you, of being one of the big tech CEOs. There's only so many job openings um, for those CEOs, and I wouldn't want one of those jobs anyway, even if I was qualified. But even in our day-to-day lives, this is something we deal with. Questions like, I have a piece of a service. Do I make it, or I have data collection that I'd like to do? Do I make it opt in or opt out? And if you remember, opt in means that the default is no, and the user has to take action to allow me to do something. Opt out is the opposite. Default is the data collection is on, and they have to take an action to get out. So prefer users voluntarily giving you data versus you just taking it by default and forcing them to take action to stop you. If you've ever read a privacy policy, they can get, well, they're long for starters. End user license agreements, or EULAs, EULAs, are the same way. And some of the better ones, they still have the legalese, one that'll put you to sleep. But some companies are nice and try to say things in clear English about what they do, and their general ideas behind their privacy policy and their license agreements. That certainly helps you understand um, their intent. Of course, they could lie in that, but somebody would catch them more than likely. There are also, I don't know if it's even still around. There was a service some years ago that I remember from some time ago. I forget the name of it now. That would actually look through these and would translate these policies into English to make it easier to read. Something else you should consider is data becomes, they say, data changes. Um, Simple thing like an address changes over time. A lot of you probably changed, uh, have a different mailing address than you did or a few years ago. Uh, Especially with dorms and apartments, those tend to turn over fairly quick. Um, so, you know, give your users a way to see the data you have, and then if it's wrong, if you have their wrong phone number, their wrong address, make it where they can fix it for you. Saves you some trouble, saves them some headaches. And if you deal with European Union citizens, that is actually part of the GDPR talked about last time. So just for ourselves and our own protection, you've probably heard of at least some of these. Most browsers nowadays have some kind of tracking protection to keep, like for example, that if you've heard of the Facebook Pixel, it's a pixel that has JavaScript attached to it that Facebook, that a lot of websites put on their pages, so that's how Facebook tracks your movements over the internet. Most browsers will stop stuff like that by default now. Something I use is that last one. Actually, I use DuckDuckGo. I think I may have mentioned before. Um, this this Firefox container thing is actually pretty neat. It lets you define a domain, so Facebook, Facebook sites or Google sites or whatever. Um, and then when you go to one of those, well, there's extensions that do this for you. So when you go to one of those, it actually, your tab shifts. I don't know if I can, so you may or may not be able to see it. Um, so, so when I go to, probably not going to be visible, but up here in the tab, there's a little orange line. You probably can't see on the screen. You can see it in the recording, but an orange line that's telling me it's in a container. So what Firefox lets you do is through these. There's a Google one, there's a Facebook one that Mozilla provides, or that they created. Um, Anytime you deal with Google or Facebook or whoever you set it up with, it goes into this container which is walled off from the rest of the browser. So it's almost like another copy of your, or another instance of all the your cookies and things that sites put. So so in this case, Google can only see the things that I do on Google Sites, and then it can't see what I do elsewhere, unless there's some tracking that they do that they can match up to me. Although Firefox does try to get rid of that too. So anyway, something. Anyway, so there's a few examples, and just as the expression goes, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody's giving you a service for free. There's going to be some kind of cost. Now, if it's just, it may be a cost that we're happy to pay. I use Gmail, and fine, they see my personal email. That's okay. I mean, that's okay. I don't really like it, but it is what it is. And something that is probably controversial. I don't personally use an ad blocker. I do avoid tracking, and sometimes that gets flagged as sites will flag that as an ad blocker when it's really just I'm preventing something from a Facebook ad probably to show up. I don't use an ad blocker because if kind of take it to the extreme, if everybody used an ad blocker, then none of these sites would make money, and they'd all either go out of business or stop being free. And so I kind of draw the line there of, I'm okay with seeing some ads to get to a site that I like to read without paying them. So that's what I do. Anyway, that is that. Okay. Doing okay time wise. Any questions, comments about this? I'm glad there have been some. Last class had almost nothing to say. So I'm glad for that. If you don't see any. Okay. We can spend, so as I mentioned when I emailed you yesterday, there was a tie. This both of my sections have done this now between the two topics, between this one here, the photo sharing site, and the one about Apple and child porn. Which so I broke the tie the same way for your class and the other one. Went with this one in part. Well, the Apple one has kind of been. Let me tell you a little bit about it. So this is not the topic you're talking about, but a few months ago, Apple came out with this. What do they call it? They had an acronym for it, CPAN or something, where what they were going to do was there was this registry of known, or, well, not the images, but some hashes of images of child pornography, which is illegal to have or share or anything like that. And in fact, we'll mention that. We'll mention that in a week or two. Why that is so. But anyway, so Apple had this idea of how they can cut down on that, and in their, and trying to balance combating child porn with keeping users' privacy intact. So what they settled on was they had this registry of image hashes, and they would take when you went to upload a photo to iCloud, and it was only iCloud, before the file was uploaded, that picture's hash would be checked against this registry of hashes, and if there was a match and I'm not exactly sure how they implemented the hashing, probably a match or a near match, it would be flagged. Having one match would not do anything. They had some limit of 10 or 20 or 30 or something. Where if you got too many of them, then Apple would start investigating. if perhaps you were a keeper of child porn. They've actually since, well, delayed it at the very least. They've kind of, there was a big backlash over the idea, and so they've stepped back and they're not doing it yet. I think they're going to study it and probably try again. But anyway, that was the other one. This one is more straightforward, I'd say. In this scenario, you are someone who wants to set up a photo sharing site. Um, I picked photo sharing site because it's something that has competition, and some of it is quote unquote free, like Amazon Photos, Google Photos was until earlier this year. So you want to set up a photo sharing site, and the decision you've got to make is how are you going to pay for it. That's the key decision in any company's life is how are we going to pay the bills. So you have a choice. You can be, you can make the site free um, and put up ads and or do some other things, or you could do what what some services do, where you're welcome to store photos on a site, but you just have to pay for the storage and some kind of monthly fee tied to the cost of you actually storing the photos plus the cost of you just doing business and hopefully some profit in there too. So you've got to decide which way you go, and neither option, at least in my mind, is an obvious one. Um, if you go the ad supported route, you probably get, at least that's what companies say. Ads are more valuable if they're targeted. So like if you scan your user's photo, so kind of what you might have to do is scan your user's photos and look for things in them, and then show them ads based on or either the photos themselves or the metadata is like where they were taken, stuff like that. And that would be part of how you pay for the site. And so the other option is if you were not ad supported, you're going to have to charge your users. But the issue there is it's a whole lot, it's easier for you or me to sign up for a service that's free and then try it out, uh, and just keep using it because it's free versus having to pay. Now, one of the options and something that some students did last time was they said, okay, I may do a free trial or something like that. That's fine. Free trial to get people to try it. But the issue when you're paid is you've got to find people that are willing to pay. And when you have other services that are free with either ads or free with something, you know, Amazon Photos, you can store photos there for free if you remember Prime, and so that's kind of, you know, you're paying for it, but lots of people are already paying for it, so it just feels like a perk. And so the question is which you choose, and how would you deal with the consequences? If you go the free route, there's going to be privacy concerns. Um, and if you don't go the free route, how are you going to promote yourself and get people interested in paying you money for the service directly? So we've got 18 minutes or so. What ideas do you have? Maybe which way you might go, and what might your rationale be? And like I said, I'm not. And I'll get to you in a sec, but I'm not going to force you to pick. I mean, you could do some kind of hybrid option. Like I said, you could do free trial. That's certainly fine. But just I'm not going to force you down one of those two specifically. Yeah.
I'll probably make it a paid service.
Okay.
Make it towards like an exclusive, like higher end clientele,
Uh-huh.
professional photographers.
Okay.
We might want to pay for the specialized
Okay.
service.
Okay. Yeah. I hadn't thought of going that route. So the idea that he had was to make it paid and to be more focused instead of being just to the general public, be to like professional photographers, people that see the value in, of course, in online storage backups and in, well, and in keeping them private. Uh, so, okay, that's a fair way to go, to say I'm going to not make this I mean, open to anybody, but targeted more towards a specific market. That's a good idea. Okay. What else are you thinking? Yeah.
I have a quick question on the actual product itself.
Okay.
So, it's a photo sharing site, something like an image board, like 4chan kind of thing, or is it more like Dropbox?
Question is what do I mean by image sharing site? Or photo sharing site. I'm thinking along the lines of like Google Photos, Amazon Photos, something where and probably shouldn't have called it photo sharing. Well, the idea where I have some photos and I can give you a link to see some of my photos, something like that. So not um, he said, I'm not familiar with the service you mentioned, so that's kind of the basics where I store them and then I can share them as I desire to. Not necessarily set up directly for, you put them up there and they're public to everybody, um, but just I can share them as I want to with my friends. Okay. Does that help? Okay. What else? Yeah.
And also just use it as a free service, but like if they want to go to, so I just give them limited features,
Uh-huh.
and then if they want to transition to a premium model
Hmm.
that would also have like all their data, we could switch to that.
Okay.
There's a lot of, or actually, Fremont probably wouldn't collect your data because you get enough money from the people that actually pay.
Say that last sentence again. Sorry.
So it's a bit like a free trial service,
Uh-huh.
only more where you there's a lot of services that will allow you to trial, that will allow you to use their services for an unlimited amount of time.
Uh-huh.
Just there are certain restrictions,
Okay. Yeah.
such as like you can only sort of like keep a certain amount. You can't
Yeah.
sort of like over the amount,
Okay.
and
Okay.
if they want to transition to the paid model, they can if they use that service.
Okay. So that idea, and that's a good one too, is to you could do a free trial, free limited in length, or you could say there's a free version that is limited in features. So maybe you get small amount of storage, or maybe you know whatever advanced features if you wanted to put a photo editor on there, that might be locked. Stuff like that might be locked behind the pay might be locked to the paying subscribers. Yeah, that's certainly viable too. Again, give people a chance to try it to kind of get that get that help people find you and try you without having to pay, and then hopefully convert them into paying customers. Okay, yeah, you can go for that. What else are y'all thinking? Something I know the other section did when they were approaching this. Um, they even had like some of them had an idea of a kind of a reward system, so that if you get one of your friends to sign up, you might have start with 5 gigs of storage or whatever, and then I'll give the site will give you another 5 gigs of storage just for the referral bonus, or might give you a month of premium features if you sign somebody else up, something like that. That's also fine. The point of it is to get you to think about that compromise and how privacy plays in. Because last time, there were a lot of students that said, no, I'm not going to collect data, so I'm just going to go the paid route only, and that's which is fine. It just as long as you uh, have an idea of what you would do with it. I mean, I'm obviously not expecting a fully drawn out business plan. Um, you only have 500 words. That's not the point, but just think about how you would get around the issue of people finding and people being interested enough to pay for a news site that nobody's heard of before. Other ideas? Yeah. Provide a what kind of option? Sorry. Okay. So just so the payment would just be to turn the ads off. Yeah, you could turn. That's another viable way to approach the privacy thing. And so the idea there would be it's free with ads, but there's a a monthly payment or yearly payment or whatever that turns off the ads and probably would also say we're not going to store this data about you so long as you pay. We're not going to keep this data on you. You just have your photos there. That's another valid option. Yeah. Anybody else? So if you've never been a teacher before or stood up in front of an audience, the one thing that is harder than talking to an audience is not talking to an audience where especially when you ask a question. And I've found I'm going off on a tangent here, I know, but I've found that some questions, you can think, I tend to think of it like a spectrum of, on one end there's the blindingly obvious question that nobody wants to respond to because they're really thinking, is that really what you're asking? Is it really that simple? And on the other end is the severely open-ended, nobody understands what the professor is even after type of question. So try to get somewhere, I try to get somewhere in between. But one of the challenges is, if you ever do public speaking, is to shut up and and give people a chance to think. So I'll be quiet and give you a chance to think. Anybody else want to have an idea they'd like to suggest or a possibility you want to run by me just to see if that happened in the last class? Is that, would it be okay if I did? Yeah, I'm thinking about doing this. Would that be okay? I'm happy to give you a thumbs up, thumbs down, or sounds okay, but do it this way instead. Yeah. Okay. In fact, yeah, that was even in the prompt. So the idea there is instead of doing ads, find other ways to monetize things. So like, in fact, there's a service my wife uses. Oh, I can't think of what it is. Um, it's a service where you upload photos, and then every month they mail you a stack of them, a little book of the photos you stored up there. So I could think of it. Anyways, it's like $3-4 a month or something like that. So the value that you're providing is not just the storage, but also you can get physical copies of them, or you know, a lot of them do. You can store photos, but if you do, we want you to make a calendar, photo calendar, daily calendar, or something like that. Yeah, and that's fine to go that way too. Say we'll let you store it for free, and you can even say we're going to require you, because I've seen this done. For a time, I used CVS or CVS, no, I think it was Walgreens, one of them, for printing photos. I wasn't putting them up there. I didn't upload them to store them there, but they're like, if you don't order something in the next 30 days, we're going to delete all your photos. And I was like, okay, I have them elsewhere. I don't care. Please delete them. But that's certainly a way you can go with it. Yeah.
You could have for paid service that at least early on, you could give early adopters some free time where they get to use the service without having to pay for it.
Okay. So like a beta testing program, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah,
No
some
critical mass.
yeah, that's a good idea. So you have in your business plan that we're going to run for free for the first month or two or whatever, while we're testing, and then anybody that registers can use the service for free with all the features we're making, and hopefully provide feedback if something goes wrong, or just so we get to test the system under load. and they get the experience, and hopefully they will get to like it and see that we're awesome responsive developers and we're trying to make something that they like, and then get enough people that they can then turn around and tell other people. Is that
Yeah.
okay? Yeah, that's certainly, that's, hadn't thought of that one before. That's a good way to it's the, I don't know if it's a business term, but term that comes to mind is priming the pump, uh, to find some, get some people in enough to hopefully get them to recommend you to other people. Okay. Yeah.
I think for paid service, you could somehow figure out how to bundle up a family package where someone sacrifices a pay, and then everyone else could like
Okay.
use the service for
That's a good one.
use.
Yeah. The idea is to not just have an individual service, but to have like a family one where you get multiple accounts. Correct me if I go wrong. Multiple accounts for a, you know, reduced fee where you and your family could all use it at the same time. Yeah, that's, you certainly, you see that done in places uh, like the consumer version of Office 365, or they may call it Microsoft 365 now, whatever, where you can get five people in your family all using it for a smaller price. Or, well, better than that would be Spotify or Apple Music, where I think an individual subscription is $10, but a family one with several people is 15 a month. So yeah, that'd be a good way to get more users and make them feel like they're getting a, or give them a good deal on it. Yeah, I like that. What are we doing? What else? We got about 5 minutes. Good that y'all are thinking and coming up with ideas. I ended up, because of the greater situation last time was not good, um, especially with it being a short class. I think it's settled out this time. I've got the same grader I did then, and he's good about keeping up. But I ended up grading this last time, and so um, it's nice to hear some ideas that people in the last class didn't come up with. Nice to, some other ideas. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Going once, going twice. All right. If I'm standing between you and lunch, then I'll stand between you and lunch no longer. We'll stop here. I hope you have a great weekend, and if you haven't run into any issues, just let me know, and we'll see what we can do to take care of them. And your word, if you haven't gotten it, is advertised right back there. All right. Have a good day and good weekend.